In the shadow of my own neatly trimmed lawn, a sudden brush of fingertips sets my heart racing, an electric reminder of everything I desired but buried deep. Her laughter dances in the air, so intoxicating yet wrapped in secrets. And as the sun sets, I can't help but wonder, can I unearth the truth in the dark? The warm, golden sun dipped behind the closely knit brownstones of our Boston neighborhood, casting long shadows over the cobblestone paths that snaked like veins through the urban landscape. My block was alive with the gentle hum of evening activity. Families returning from their day, jukeboxes spilling out the nostalgic notes of Billy Joel from the basement apartment, and the muffled laughter of children still playing in the fading light. Each house stood shoulder to shoulder, whispering stories of lives intertwined, yet each one concealed its own depths of solitude. It felt like everything and everyone around me buzzed with energy, while I, Jake, remained confined within an invisible cage of morning routines and mundane conversations. At 40-something, I felt like a misfit in my own life, an errant note in a well-orchestrated symphony. Across the street, Claire, my wife, held steadfast to her roles as a stable provider and dutiful partner, embodying the ideals of domesticity with her perfectly permed hair and meticulously curated plant collection. Our home was meticulously organized, a vessel of routine, where spontaneity felt as foreign as the currency of small talk. She excelled at keeping peace, yet over time, her attention transformed into a shield, warding off the passionate conversations and interchangeable glances we once shared. It was as if our lives had been edited into a monotonous script, and I was left yearning for the soulful dialogue that lifted me out of the shadows of our predictable union. And then there was Natalie, my neighbor, with her ink-black hair cascading in wild curls that danced with the breeze, was a whirlwind of energy and joy who brought color to my sepia-toned world. She invaded my mornings and my dreams with her laughter, which rang out like a melody over our shared fence. While I was mired in the commitments of adulthood, Natalie approached life like an open book, ready to scrawl her own story in vibrant ink on a blank page. I often caught her leaning on her garden spade, her eyes sparkling with mischief and curiosity as she transformed her backyard into a small oasis. Her flirtation was electric, igniting a sense of adventure I had long abandoned. One particular afternoon, I stood by my window, coffee mug in hand, watching as Natalie danced between pots and flowers, her movements rhythmic and filled with an untamed spirit. The scent of earthy soil filled the air, weaving with the intoxicating aroma of blooming lilacs. An alluring perfume of a world I wanted to know. A softness settled in my chest as I looked away, forced to stare at the mundane reality of my living room clutter. It happened suddenly but not unexpectedly. My phone buzzed, jolting me from hazy reverie. A simple text from Natalie illuminated the screen. "Jake, could you lend a hand with my backyard project? I could use an extra set of hands and maybe a few laughs." The invitation was intoxicating. I felt a rush, a helpless thrill at the prospect of something other than the predictable cadence of my life. Gratitude washed over me for the momentary escape, the fantasy of a fleeting touch or shared laughter, a spark that would redeem the desolation of my days. Yet with that excitement came a creeping guilt, a shadow, the nagging whisper of loyalty pressing against my conscience. Balancing my coffee cup on the windowsill, I fidgeted with my wedding ring, tracing its cool metal surface with my fingers. This was the precipice. The decision lurking on the fringe of choice had a weight that echoed within. The enticing chance to step away from the echo of my stagnant existence or remain grounded, bound to the structure I had built. "Oh, come on, Jake. It's just a little help," I murmured to myself, half convincing, half debating. There was no denying it. The risk was palpable, yet irresistible. As the sun surrendered to the whispers of twilight, I made my decision, drawn like a moth to Natalie's flame. Clarity swept over me, colored with longing and curiosity. I could feel the pulse of adventure thrum beneath my skin, awakening dormant desires. Little did I know, the intertwining of our lives was about to unravel threads tightly wound around my heart, forcing me to face not just the conflict of fleeting passions, but the overarching battle within myself. The sun hung low in the Boston skyline, casting long shadows across the brick sidewalks and blending the vibrant hues of autumn leaves into a breathtaking tapestry of gold and crimson. My neighborhood, a quaint area of brownstones squeezed together, echoed with the laughter of children playing in the nearby community gardens. Their carefree energy juxtaposed with the tension I felt simmering just beneath the surface of my life. Each evening, the hum of the city enveloped me, yet inside my brownstone, there was only silence, a suffocating stillness that haunted the hallways of my mind. I had fallen into a rhythm, a dance so predictable that it felt almost choreographed. Claire, my wife, moved through our home like clockwork, her nurturing presence a comfortable blanket that also felt constricting. She was the stable rock I had once cherished, but over time, the very qualities I admired became chains binding me to a life I no longer recognized as my own. I saw her in the kitchen, stirring a pot of her famous vegetable stew, the aroma filling the air. "What's for dinner?" I'd often ask, feigning interest as I clutched my briefcase, wishing for the day to unravel itself differently, searching for an escape that always felt just out of reach. Sitting on our porch one evening, I watched the sun dip below the horizon while the leaves danced in the brisk wind. My gaze shifted to Natalie's backyard, separated by a modest fence but connected by more than mere proximity. She was outdoors, struggling with rolls of fencing while her dog, a boisterous golden retriever named Max, dashed around excitedly. A spark ignited within me, and as if pulled by an unseen force, I stood up and drifted toward my phone. Within moments, I found myself drafting a message to Natalie, offering help. "Jake. Hey, need an extra hand with that fence?" The reply came quickly, filled with her characteristic energy that made my heart race. "Natalie. Absolutely. I could use some manly muscle. How about now?" I hesitated, glancing back at Claire, who was obliviously engaged in her culinary world. That's when I felt it. An exhilaration that began to whisper sweet nothings, promising adventure and a taste of something that was mine to claim. Something daringly forbidden. As I stepped through that gate into Natalie's yard, the air felt charged, electric with possibilities. She turned from her task, her face lighting up like the stars above. "Jake, perfect timing." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. And despite the physical labor awaiting us, I could tell this would not be mere work. There was an undercurrent of flirtation that hung in the air, palpable and intoxicating. "Let's get started, shall we?" I said, trying to suppress the hopeful flutter in my chest. We began, but the conversation flowed more than the shovels in our hands. Natalie's laughter punctuated the afternoon, mixing with wind and whispers, and I found myself leaning closer as we strategized how best to secure the fence. Our shoulders brushed, igniting something dormant within me. "You know," she said, her voice softening, "you don't have to be defined by your marriage. Life is too short to be trapped." Her words struck a chord, echoing the very conflict raging in my heart. I could feel the weight of my choices looming behind me, a Goliath of guilt and responsibility. But the allure of adventure, of breaking free from the constraints that Claire had unknowingly woven around my life, felt like the breath of fresh air I had longed for. "I'm not trapped," I replied, though the flimsy defense barely resembled the truth. The moment hung between us, delicate yet heavy. Then her hand grazed mine as she reached for a tool. The air between us crackled with unsaid desires, the promise of something more than mere camaraderie. A fleeting look, those bright green eyes of hers capturing my spirit, left my palms sweating and conflicted. "Just think about it," she murmured, a smile teasing her lips. I swallowed hard, struggling with my thoughts as a gentle breeze stirred the dying leaves around us. As if time stood still, I couldn't tell if it was the warmth of her touch or the chill of my own choices that made me shudder inside. The line between friendship and temptation began to blur. In that moment, the door to my repressed desires had creaked open. A gentle nudge from Natalie, leading me toward the precipice of temptation. As the sun dipped lower, the shadows deepened. A quiet voice began to echo softly, suggesting that perhaps, just perhaps, I could embrace the vulnerability of wanting more. As I stepped through the gate to Natalie's backyard, the sun hung low in the sky, casting an inviting warmth over the vibrant greens and yellows of her flourishing garden. I could feel the familiar tug of excitement mixed with trepidation. It was the same sensation I experienced every time I came here. This wasn't just a backyard renovation anymore. It was a doorway into something I had never quite cultivated in my life. And with each step, the weight of my marriage to Claire sank deeper within me, pressing against my chest like a heavy stone. "Hey, Jake," Natalie called out, her voice playful as she leaned against the fence that separated our lives. She wore a tank top that framed her tan shoulders and shorts that perfectly hugged her curves. The sunlight played upon her skin like a gentle caress, and I felt heat flood my cheeks, despite my best efforts to remain composed. My heart raced at the prospect of another day lost in her world. "You ready to get your hands dirty?" Natalie teased, beckoning me closer with that daring smile of hers, an expression that illuminated something in her, something I longed for but rarely recognized in my own life. I chuckled awkwardly, nodding as I grasped the tools I had brought along. It felt ridiculous, almost childlike. But today I wouldn't dwell on the should-haves or what-ifs. Today meant moments spent with her. As we worked together digging through the rich earth, our shoulders brushed frequently, an innocent proximity that ignited sparks of electricity between us. Each accidental touch sent a thrill down my spine, a reminder of everything I had been missing, everything I was afraid to admit to myself. "You know, you've got a knack for this kind of work," Natalie complimented, tossing her hair back with a laugh that had the power to drown out the hum of my conscience. "Only because I'm trying to impress you," I found myself admitting, half joking yet filled with an intensity that clouded my judgment. "Oh, really?" She raised an eyebrow, vibrant green eyes sparkling with mischief as she stepped closer, and my breath caught in my throat. "Then let's just see how well you can impress me." Her words were playful, yet they bore the weight of promise. The closer we stood, the more I could feel the thudding of my pulse echoing in my ears, drowning out the reason I fought against. As we shared fleeting glances, the world around us began to fade. The soft rustling of leaves became background music to the symphony of tension that radiated between us. I was acutely aware of her body, how the scent of lavender from the garden blended with her natural allure, intoxicatingly lingering in the air. "Need a hand?" I asked, watching her kneel beside the flower bed. Without thinking, I reached out to help her balance, my fingers brushing against hers. The moment felt electric, charged with unspoken words and concealed desires. Through that contact, I sensed a shift in the ambiance. Everything around us blurred, and all I could focus on was her. "Maybe I need more than a hand, Jake," she murmured, her voice dropping to a sultry whisper that danced across my skin and ignited every dormant spark within. The weight of my guilt clashed violently with the burgeoning wave of excitement that surged through me. "Right," I replied, swallowing hard, suddenly aware of the truth I was neglecting. What was I doing? But before I could gather my thoughts, Natalie's lips crushed against mine in a fervent kiss that felt both liberating and destructive. Her hands curled around my neck, pulling me closer as a wave of heat enveloped us. For a moment, the world around us dissolved into nothingness. Every ounce of tension, of societal expectations, vanished into the air, replaced by the primal urge that left no room for reason. I kissed her back with a passion I had long buried, the taste of her lips intoxicating, a sweetness that masked the bitterness of my reality. Every brush of her fingertips across my skin sent ripples of excitement coursing through my body, awakening an urgency I hadn't experienced in years. I was pressed against the wooden fence, the scent of freshly turned earth all around us, a cruel reminder that I was still straddling two worlds, and one was threatening to crumble beneath me. "Jake," she breathed, pulling away just slightly, her eyes a tempest of emotions. "Are you okay?" Her concern stirred a rush of guilt that twisted in my gut. "I shouldn't have," I stammered, my voice shaky as I grasped her shoulders, desperately trying to understand the magnitude of our actions. "This isn't right." "But it feels right, doesn't it?" she challenged, her expression shifting from concern to boldness. "You can't keep pretending forever. You're here with me, and I see you, Jake. The real you." Her words wrapped around my heart like a vice, squeezing tight. The conflict roared inside me, echoing louder than any voice of reason. I was enchanted, yet haunted, caught in the snare of a burgeoning infidelity, neither David nor Goliath, but a man drowning in his own duality. "I want you," I admitted finally, almost against my will, feeling the rush of fresh air and open skies fill my lungs. How long had it been since I dared to say those words? Yet, with that admission, I felt the claws of my reality tighten around me even more. a warning that my actions would have consequences as inevitable as the sun setting on another day. Natalie smiled, mischief returning to her eyes. Then let's stop pretending. Let's just be real for a moment, Jake. The invitation hung in the air, heavy with possibility and laden with peril. But I could feel it. The walls were closing in. As desire clashed with the roots of loyalty, I knew I was at a pivotal intersection of emotions and morals. Would I have the courage to embrace the passion or retreat and rebuild the facade of normality I had played at for so long? Suddenly, my heart felt like a war drum, and I had to brace for the battle that lay ahead. The summer evening air was thick with anticipation as I stood in Natalie's backyard, the gentle hum of crickets providing the soundtrack to our new reality. Shadows danced on the wooden deck where we had spent so many afternoons working side by side on her renovation project, landscaping the flower beds, painting fences, all of it mere busy work that had somehow blossomed into something dangerously intoxicating. Tonight was different. The moonlight cast a silvery glow on Natalie's hair, turning it into a halo that caused my heart to race with both longing and guilt. "Jake," she said softly, drawing my focus from the distant hum of traffic. The sound of her voice was a spark that ignited the tension between us, wrapping us in a bubble where the outside world faded away. "Can you help me with the final touch on the trellis?" Her eyes sparkled with mischief as she leaned closer, and my resolve began to fade. "Sure," I managed to reply, though my voice barely penetrated the electric atmosphere swirling around us. I fought the impulse to step away, instead finding myself moving closer to her, entranced by the way the moonlight illuminated her features. As we arranged the flowers around the wooden structure, her fingers brushed against mine, sending shivers down my spine. I could feel the warmth radiating from her body, the familiar pull of attraction mixed with an urgency that felt primal. The once innocent dealings we had shared had morphed into something far more potent and reckless, the kind of tension that could snap at any moment, reshaping the boundaries of our friendship into new, unexplored territories. "You know, sometimes I wonder if I'm just a distraction for you," she said as she picked up a small pot of lavender, her voice imbued with a hint of vulnerability. She looked up at me, her expression inviting yet cautious. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. "No, it's more than that. You bring life back into my world." It was a shocking admission, one that felt like a betrayal even as the truth spilled from my lips. Yet it didn't seem to matter. All I could focus on was how close we were, how the tension hummed like an electric current, urging me to take that final leap. A heartbeat later, I stepped forward, my confidence surging as I closed the distance between us. "I shouldn't be doing this," I murmured, though my hands found her waist, pulling her closer to me. Her breath hitched, a clear signal that my words had lost their meaning in the heat of the moment. "Then don't think, Jake," she replied, the challenge in her eyes sparking a fire inside me. "Just feel." Before I could rein myself in, I leaned down, capturing her lips with mine. The kiss ignited like fireworks, bright and vivid, unexpected in its intensity. I had stolen so many moments with Natalie, yet this was something transformative. Her lips were soft and inviting, a promise of adventure wrapped in sweetness. I deepened the kiss, my hands roaming to tangle in her hair, feeling her warmth envelope me, threatening to consume everything I thought I knew. In that enveloping moment, I lost track of time, my guilt dissipating like mist under the morning sun, replaced with the intoxicating possibility of what we could become. Yet, a small, persistent thought nagged at the back of my mind, the face of Claire, serene yet suffocating. A reminder that this bliss was fleeting, hanging in a precarious balance on the threads of infidelity. As we pulled away, breathless, her cheeks flushed, I could see the glimmer of uncertainty in her eyes. "This is reckless," Natalie whispered, the weight of her words grounding me just as my heart began to soar. "I know," I replied, my throat dry. "But I can't seem to stop. I want this. I want you." The vulnerability in her eyes shifted, a flicker of resignation mingled with desire. "But what about Claire?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking the truth could shatter the fragile moment we were sharing. Caught in that charged silence, emotion twisted in my gut. a storm of loyalty battling against the rising need for freedom. "I don't know what to do, Natalie," I admitted, the tremor in my voice betraying my internal struggle. "I feel trapped, but the thought of hurting her—" "Jake," she interrupted, a note of urgency, the line of our connection straining as her forehead touched mine. "You have to choose. Do you want stability or a chance to truly live?" Her words struck me like a thunderbolt, the weight of my reality bearing down upon me. I could still escape. I could shut this door, but in doing so, would I lose a part of myself forever? Would I choose the gilded cage of a stagnant life with Claire over the unpredictability of love with Natalie? "Tell me, do you think it's worth it?" I asked, my voice quaking, raw with the vulnerability of my plea. "I think everything worth having comes with a risk," she replied, warmth and firmness intermingling. The flicker in her expression ignited a spark of courage within me. But as I sought for words, the shadows shifted in my mind. Fear of confrontation loomed over me. Just then, a sound echoed from my phone, slicing through the tension like a knife. A message. I glanced down and felt my heart drop into the pit of my stomach. It was Claire. "Where are you, Jake?" I'm getting worried. In that moment, the world around me shifted back into stark clarity. The choices weighed heavily upon me as I stood between Natalie and my truths. I looked back at her, the gravity of all that lay beneath the surface tightening in my chest. And there it hung, that palpable silence, thick with the unspoken. How could I face Claire and the decisions I had made? Would I continue along this path or fight against the Goliath of my own creation? Before I could pull my thoughts together, Natalie's eyes found mine, filled with questions. A silent acknowledgement of the storm brewing on the horizon. I could no longer run, and I could no longer lie. I felt as if I was standing at the edge of a precipice, and the time had come to jump. I stood in the living room, the walls closing in around me like a suffocating fog. Claire's eyes burned with a mixture of disbelief and anger, and all I could hear was the deafening thrum of my heartbeat drumming in my ears. The confrontation had erupted like a storm. Out of nowhere, fueled by the late hour and the scent of Natalie still lingering on my skin, a perfume that felt like betrayal itself. "Where have you been, Jake?" Claire's voice trembled, each word heavy with accusation. "You've been gone for hours." I could feel the weight of her gaze, crystal blue and piercing, demanding answers I wasn't ready to give. I should have told her the truth when I had the chance, but every time I opened my mouth, the words faltered at the edge of my conscience. Instead, I remained silent, knowing that any explanation would only deepen the chasm between us. "It's not just about where I've been, is it? It's about where you've been. With her?" Claire leaned in, her face a mask of hurt and rage. "You think I haven't noticed? The late nights, the distractions? You think I wouldn't figure it out? You don't understand," I finally managed, desperation leaking into my voice. I felt so lost, so trapped in this marriage, in this life. As I spoke, I could feel the floodgates opening. "I thought I could manage it all, be the husband you deserve, but I couldn't find myself anymore." "You think this is just about you?" Claire scoffed, the sound bitter, laced with disbelief. "What about me? What about everything we built together?" Her eyes glistened, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her facade, the indecisiveness flashing through her features. A sense of unease crept in, curling around my stomach like a knot. "Everything we've built?" I echoed weakly, my mind racing. I glanced down, grappling with guilt, with the haunting memories of laughter shared with Natalie, the softness of her touch, the fire in her kisses, moments that felt real, far removed from the icy routines of my life with Claire. "Jake, tell me." Claire's voice rose, commanding yet vulnerable. "Have you really fallen in love with her?" I closed my eyes, the question echoing in the recesses of my mind. A tumult of emotions battered against my insides. Guilt, desire, dread, and something that felt uncannily like freedom. But saying it aloud felt like crossing an unnameable boundary. "It's complicated, Complicated?" she interrupted harshly, each word like a slap. "You expect me to believe that's all this is?" Her own voice faltered slightly, softened by tremors of uncertainty. "Tell me if you're in love with her, just say it, and let's end the charade." Taken aback, I felt the walls I had erected begin to crumble. The realization hit me hard. I had been living a lie, tethered to a falsehood that began with my selfish pursuits. I opened my mouth, the truth poised on the tip of my tongue. Yes, but it's not as simple. Not as simple as what? You're risking everything we have. Everything. The sobering words sank into the air like lead. There was despair in her eyes, a raw, visceral heartbreak that cut deeper than any physical pain. I knew I had to choose, and for a moment, clarity washed over me, making everything feel achingly precise. I still loved Claire, in so many intricate ways. Her laughter, the way she cared for me, the quiet moments of connection. But I also felt shackled by the routine that had become our lives. The mundane, the predictable. I glanced down and saw a reflection of myself I barely recognized. The infidel. The coward. All this time, I was trying to escape. I murmured, almost to myself, tears brimming in my eyes. I thought being with Natalie would make me feel alive again, would bring me joy, but it's only brought more pain. I was enveloped in a rush of conflicting emotions, the truth weighing heavier than I anticipated. I've lost sight of who I am, and I can't keep dragging you down with me. Claire's features softened momentarily, both of us caught in the web of emotional truths that felt both alien and familiar. What do you really want then, Jake? You can't keep living in limbo. You need to decide which person you want to be. That question hung heavily in the air, unraveling everything. The bold decisions, the waking up next to Natalie while clinging to the pretense of a marriage, it all led to this moment. A fissure in my reality. I felt raw, vulnerable, standing naked in my truth, battling my demons, both external and internal. I want to be true to myself, I whispered, a clarity breaking through the chaos of my thoughts. I want to reclaim everything I've lost, but I need to face the consequences. The tension in the room shifted, the enormity of what lay ahead now palpable. I had a choice to make, and it gelled into a turning point that sparked a tumult of hope and despair. Whatever path I chose would reshape my existence, unravel bonds, and expose my deepest truths. I'll tell Natalie it's over, I declared, voice trembling but firm. Let's talk about this. Really talk. I refuse to let my mistakes destroy everything I once cared for. With that commitment, I felt the first breath of hope seep into my heart, a promise to confront my failures head-on, and a chance for both of us to rediscover who we were amidst the chaos brought on by desire and betrayal. The next morning, the sun rose gently over Boston, painting the city in hues of gold and orange, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within me. As I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched coffee cooling in my cup, the memory of the confrontation with Claire played on a harrowing loop in my mind. Every word we exchanged, every accusation slung like daggers, reverberated through the very core of my being. I could still feel the intensity of that moment, which forced me to confront the reality I had attempted to evade for too long. Claire's expression, a mixture of hurt and piercing clarity, haunted me. "I thought I knew you, Jake," she had said, her voice trembling as she clutched a necklace I had gifted her years ago, a symbol of the love we once shared. But now, it's like I'm looking at a stranger. Her words cut deep, revealing just how much I had hidden behind a facade of contentment. At that moment, I didn't just lose her trust. I lost a part of myself, the part that took pride in being faithful and honorable. As I walked through our familiar neighborhood, the very streets I once navigated with ease now felt foreign, a reminder of everything I had neglected. Each step echoed the realization that I was not just battling a desire for adventure with Natalie, I was grappling with my own identity. What did I want? Who was I beyond the roles of husband and neighbor? I turned my attention towards Claire. We needed to talk, really talk. After all, empathy is the cornerstone of any relationship. That evening, I found her in the living room, framed by the glow of a dim lamp, her face buried in her phone. With every nerve in my body firing, I approached her, ready to peel away the layers of misunderstanding time had built between us. "Can we talk?" I offered, my voice unsteady yet determined. Claire glanced up, her eyes dark yet curious. For a moment, the silence stretched, thick with unsaid words, until she nodded hesitantly. I messed up, I began, the weight of those words heavier than I anticipated. I've been selfish, lost in my own struggles, ignoring the reality of who we are. You deserve more than what I've given you. Holding her gaze, I added, I want to understand you, Claire. Not just as my wife, but as a person. We both need to acknowledge the shadows in our marriage. It was a slow process, but as we opened up, both of us willing to strip away our defenses, I could feel the tension beginning to lift. Claire and I articulated our dreams, our fears, and even our frustrations. In doing so, empathy blossomed between us, rekindling the connection we had all but extinguished. Looking back, I realized the affair was not the end, but a necessary turning point. The confrontation had forced me to truly see my own capacity for love and betrayal. It was a painful lesson in honesty, prompting me to be vulnerable in ways I'd avoided for years. As weeks passed, the intimacy with Claire slowly returned, not as it had been, but transformed, filled with newfound understanding and communication. Meanwhile, Natalie gracefully exited my life, becoming a bittersweet memory, teaching me lessons about passion and risk that urged me forward. I had reconciled the David within me, facing the Goliath of my doubts and fears with courage. In reclaiming my values, I stepped out of my confinement, ready to embrace whatever came next, be it alongside Claire or as a rekindled self. The shadows no longer scared me. They were part of my journey towards growth and understanding.